Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself thousands of years ago in the cradle of civilization. Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. The sun has long since slipped below the horizon, leaving the city cloaked in a deep velvet dusk. The day's heat lingers faintly on the clay walls, but the air is cooler now, softened by the breath of the Euphrates drifting across the fields. The bustle of the marketplace has faded into memory, its shouts and clamor replaced by a hush that settles over narrow lanes and tall mud-brick homes. Along the streets, small oil lamps flicker in the night. Their flames are steady but gentle, tiny golden pools of light that dance against stone thresholds and wooden doors. From high rooftops, families sit together, cooling themselves under the open sky. The murmur of their voices blends with the whisper of the river, forming a quiet lullaby that belongs only to the night. If you look upward, the heavens stretch vast and unbroken. The stars glow with the clarity of an ancient sky, brighter, sharper, more alive than what most of us know today. To the Mesopotamians, these stars were not silent lights. They were the writing of the gods themselves, a divine script spread across the firmament. Every flicker, every wandering planet, every cluster carried meaning, just as the clay tablets below would one day hold words. Somewhere in the city, perhaps in Ur or Babylon, the faint sound of a reed flute drifts from a courtyard. A mother hums as she rocks her child to sleep. Dogs stir lazily in the shadows. And above it all, the ziggurat rises like a mountain of stone, its terraces bathed in moonlight. Within its sacred chambers, priests prepare for the night, for it is not only a time of rest, it is a time when the boundary between mortals and gods grows thin. In Mesopotamia, the night was never just darkness, it was possibility. A time when dreams would arrive, carried on the wings of sleep, filled with omens, symbols, and voices that could alter the course of lives. And so, as the city settles into silence, we step closer into that world, into a place where every dream was a message, every vision a thread in the fabric of destiny. The land of Mesopotamia takes its very name from water. Mesopotamia, the word means between the rivers. And here, in this great stretch of fertile earth, two mighty rivers carved out a world where humanity's first great cities were born. To the east runs the Tigris, swift and unpredictable. Its waters rush down from the mountains, carrying with them both life and danger. In springtime, it swells suddenly, overflowing its banks, a force both feared and respected. Its currents are quick, its voice loud, like a restless spirit unwilling to be tamed. To the west flows the Euphrates, broader, slower, more forgiving. It moves with patience, winding through plains and villages, leaving behind silt and soil that turn the land rich and dark. Farmers look to the Euphrates as a gentle provider, its waters guiding their canals, nourishing their barley dates, and gardens of herbs. Together, these rivers shaped everything. They gave bread to the table, reeds for writing, clay for bricks, fish for supper, and trade routes that carried ideas from city to city. Between them stretched fields and marshes, orchards and pasture lands, where shepherds guided flocks and farmers worked the fertile earth. And when night fell, these rivers whispered in the dark. Their waters shimmered under starlight, carrying reflections of the moon across their restless surfaces. From the banks, one could hear the soft croak of frogs, the distant splash of fish, the rustle of reeds stirred by evening breezes. For the people who lived here, the rivers were not just natural features. They were living presences, watched over by gods, flowing with meaning. In their floods and droughts, in their calm or fury, the Mesopotamians saw signs, omens, and divine messages. Just as dreams carried voices from beyond, so too did the rivers speak, telling stories in water instead of in words. It was in this land between two ever-moving rivers, beneath wide skies heavy with stars, that human beings learned to write, to pray, to build temples, and to dream. The land itself was a dream given shape, fragile, fertile, and alive with mystery. When the final light of day slipped away over Mesopotamia, life did not vanish into silence. It changed. The rhythm of the city softened, settling into a gentler pace that belonged to the night. In the bustling markets, the clamor of bargaining, voices gave way to stillness. Merchants pulled woven mats over their stalls, locking away jars of oil, baskets of figs, and bolts of cloth. The scent of spices lingered faintly in the cooling air, cinnamon, cumin, and frankincense, traces of the day's trade now drifting with the evening breeze. Within homes built of sun-dried brick, families gathered together. The hearth became the center of the household, its small fire glowing warmly in the shadows. Meals were simple but comforting. Bowls of lentils, flatbread baked on clay ovens, perhaps dates sweetened with honey. Children, their day of play behind them, sat close to parents or grandparents, listening to stories passed down from generations. On rooftops, where the air was cooler, families often spread mats or cushions. From here, they could look across the city and out to the fields beyond. Oil lamps flickered like golden stars among the houses, while the real stars above burned brighter still. Men and women spoke softly of the day's work, of crops and herds, of neighbors and kin. Their voices were hushed, as though night itself invited gentleness. The sounds of the city changed to, instead of the hammering of craftsmen or the cries of market sellers, one heard the bark of a dog echoing in a narrow street, or the creak of a water-drawing wheel turned by a sleepy ox. Somewhere, a lullaby rose, a mother singing her child into slumber. Night did not mean inactivity. For priests in the temples, it was a sacred time. They prepared incense, observed the stars, and read omens in the heavens. Some stayed awake to guard the sacred fire, while others guided worshippers, seeking dreams from the gods. And always, beyond the walls, the rivers whispered. The Euphrates and the Tigris continued their eternal course, carrying fragments of moonlight across their restless waters. Their voices joined the chorus of the night, soft, steady, eternal. For the Mesopotamians, life after sunset was not merely the closing of the day. It was the opening of another world, a world of rest, of dreams, and of unseen messages that awaited in the quiet hours before dawn. As the city of Mesopotamia quieted, each household turned toward rest. Sleep was not just a necessity of the body, but a rhythm of life, a pause that allowed the soul to wander between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. Inside the homes of the wealthy, chambers were set aside for sleeping. These rooms were simple by our standards, but carefully arranged for comfort. Wooden bed frames, rare and costly, were strewn with woven mats or covered with layers of wool. Pillows, filled with reeds or straw, lifted the head gently. In the colder months, thick blankets of sheep's wool were drawn close, while in summer, lighter linens allowed the air to pass through. For most people, sleep was humbler but no less meaningful. Mats of woven reeds were spread across floors of packed earth, or carried up to rooftops where families rested beneath the open sky. There, the night air was cooler, and the stars became a canopy brighter than any ceiling lamp, eternal in their quiet. Watchfulness. The act of lying down to sleep was not hurried. Families often placed small oil lamps at the bedside, their flames glowing softly, warding off both darkness and the unseen spirits believed to wander in it. Beside the lamps might sit amulets, figures of protective gods, carved from clay or stone, guarding the dreamer as they drifted into the unknown. To the Mesopotamians, sleep was not a passive state. It was an opening. In slumber, the body rested, but the soul became a traveler, free to walk the roads of the night and meet with gods, spirits, and ancestors. Each mat or bed was therefore more than a place of rest. It was a threshold, a doorway through which the sleeper might step into a world of visions, whether in a palace chamber draped with woven cloth, or on a simple reed mat cooled by the night breeze. The people of Mesopotamia understood the place of sleep as sacred. It was here, in the stillness, that dreams would come softly, mysteriously, carrying with them the voices of a realm beyond. For the people of Mesopotamia, dreams were never dismissed as idle fancies. They were not passing shadows of the mind, nor simple fragments of memory. Dreams were messages. Every dream was thought to carry weight, sent from beyond the veil of the everyday world. To dream was to enter into a dialogue with powers greater than oneself. The gods, it was believed, did not speak only in thunder or in the turning of the stars. They also spoke in the quiet of the night, when the dreamer lay still, eyes closed, soul unguarded. Some dreams offered comfort, wrapping the sleeper in visions of family, abundance, or joy. Others arrived heavy with warning, their images filled with storms, crumbling walls, or wild beasts. To the Mesopotamian mind, such dreams were not accidents of imagination. They were signs, clues to what was coming, gifts of foresight that could shape decisions in waking life. A farmer who dreamt of water overflowing might see it as a sign of an abundant harvest, or as a warning of floods that would sweep away his fields. A merchant who dreamt of losing his wares might take it as caution, choosing to delay a journey along the river. And kings especially listened. A ruler might alter the course of war, delay the laying of a foundation stone, or dedicate a temple, all because of what he had seen in a dream. Dreams mattered because they connected the human to the divine. They were not seen as the workings of the mind alone, but as a thread woven between heaven and earth. Every dream carried the possibility of guidance. Every vision, no matter how small, was worth attention. And so, across the land between the rivers, people woke each morning with stories to tell, stories of what they had seen in the night. Some spoke their dreams aloud to priests, who searched for their meaning in sacred texts. Others shared them with family around the hearth, weighing their symbols in hushed voices. To dream was to listen. To remember was to honor. To interpret was to walk carefully with the gods. In Mesopotamia, dreams were not private fancies. They were public, communal, divine. They mattered because through them, the gods spoke and no word from the divine could be ignored. When a Mesopotamian closed their eyes at night, they did not believe the mind was inventing pictures of its own. They believed that the gods were speaking. Dreams were seen as a kind of language, divine words, carried not in sound but in images, symbols, and sensations. A god might not appear directly, yet their presence could be felt in the shape of the dream, in the sudden flight of a bird, in the rising of floodwaters, in the embrace of a stranger who whispered a name. These were not random occurrences. They were carefully chosen signs, woven into the dream as a message from realms unseen. To understand this language was not simple. Just as the stars above required patient study to reveal their meaning, so too did dreams demand interpretation. The Mesopotamians believed that the gods spoke in layers, concealing their intentions within metaphors. A lion might not mean a lion, but strength, or danger, or even the shadow of an approaching enemy. A broken wall could mean not only a fallen house, but a weakened kingdom, a threat to family, or a failing of trust. It was this subtlety that gave dreams their power. For if the gods had spoken in plain, unambiguous words, mortals would have no choice but to obey. Instead, they spoke in riddles, inviting the listener to ponder, to seek the counsel of priests, to weigh carefully the meaning of the night's visions before acting. Dreams were communication, yes, but communication wrapped in mystery. A conversation between heaven and earth carried out in symbols. Some believed that dreams traveled on the breath of a spirit known as Zak, a messenger moving between the world of gods and the world of men. Like the wind itself unseen, yet felt it entered the sleeper and placed visions in the mind. Visions that carried the voice of the divine. To the Mesopotamians, this was not illusion, it was revelation. To dream was to be entrusted with words from above, as real and as vital as inscriptions carved in stone. And so, in the stillness of the night, every dreamer became a listener. Every vision, a verse in the long conversation between mortals and their gods. In Mesopotamia, dreams were not reserved for the few. They touched everyone. And across the cities and villages of the land between the rivers, each person, high or low, listened to their dreams in their own way. For kings, dreams were matters of state. A ruler's visions could guide wars, determine alliances, or signal the building of a temple. If a king dreamed of victory, his armies marched with confidence. If he dreamed of disaster, preparations were made to avoid it. Some rulers even kept scribes near at night, ready to record their visions at dawn. For kings, a dream could alter the destiny of an entire people. For the priests, dreams were sacred texts in living form. Their duty was to listen, to interpret, and to preserve. In the temples, priests studied dream omens written on clay tablets, cross-checking a dream against centuries of recorded wisdom. If a man dreamed of a lion, or a woman of flowing water, the priests sought meaning, placing each vision within the great web of divine signs. To the priests, dreams were not private, they were messages entrusted to them by the gods themselves. For the merchants, dreams touched their livelihood. A vision of a broken jar might cause a trader to delay his river journey, fearing the loss of his goods. A dream of abundance might give courage to carry wares to distant markets. Trade was full of risk, and dreams offered guidance when the future was uncertain. For the farmers, dreams were woven into the cycles of land and harvest. A dream of heavy rain might promise fertile fields or warn of floods that would sweep away crops. The appearance of animals in dreams could speak of the health of herds, or of dangers that lurked unseen. To a farmer, dreams were not distant mysteries. They were part of the soil, the seed, and the hope of survival. Even in humble families, dreams mattered. Mothers listened to their children's nighttime visions. Fathers considered what they saw before making choices for the household. A dream of illness could bring prayers and offerings at the temple. A dream of marriage might be taken as a sign of things to come. Across all of Mesopotamia, from the grand palaces to the smallest reed huts, dreams were shared, pondered, and remembered. No one dismissed them as mere illusions of the mind. Each dreamer, king, priest, merchant, farmer, child was a participant in the divine dialogue. In a world where the gods were ever present, no vision of the night was too small to carry meaning. Rising high above the rooftops of the city, the ziggurat stood like a man-made mountain. Its steps climbed tier by tier into the heavens, each level bringing the worshipper closer to the realm of the gods. By day, it was a center of ritual and sacrifice. By night, it became something more intimate, a place where dreams were invited, nurtured, and recorded. Temples in Mesopotamia were not only houses of worship, they were spaces where heaven and earth touched, where messages from the divine could pass into the lives of mortals. The quiet of the night gave these places a special stillness, a sense that the boundary between worlds had grown thin. Pilgrims seeking answers often came to sleep within temple walls, hoping that in slumber the gods would grant a vision. This practice, known later as dream incubation, was already alive in Mesopotamia. A dream received in the sacred chambers of a ziggurat was believed to carry greater weight, for here the gods were thought to be closer, their voices clearer. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of incense, its smoke curling upward toward the rafters. Oil lamps cast soft light on painted walls and carved figures of protective deities. Priests walked silently through the corridors, murmuring prayers, preparing offerings of bread, dates, and wine for the divine. When a dreamer lay down upon a reed mat within the temple, they did so with reverence. Sleep here was not ordinary rest. It was an act of devotion, an opening of the soul to receive the will of the gods. Some dreamers sought healing, others guidance, and many came with questions of the future. At the highest point of the ziggurat, under the vast expanse of stars, priests too kept vigil. They studied the heavens, watched the movements of planets, and listened for signs that echoed the language of dreams below. The temple, then, was more than stone, and ritual. It was a bridge, a meeting place of divine and human, of earth and sky, of waking and dreaming. In these sacred spaces, the night itself became holy, and the dreams that were born within temple walls were treasured, recorded with care, and carried forward as gifts from the gods. Within the cool, shadowed halls of Mesopotamian temples, the priests held a quiet power. They were more than keepers of rituals, they were listeners, interpreters, translators of the hidden language of dreams. To prepare for this sacred duty, priests followed rhythms of discipline. They cleansed themselves with water drawn from sacred rivers, washing away impurity before they dared approach the mysteries of the gods. They clothed themselves in linen, simple yet pure, garments meant to separate the holy task from the noise of daily life. At night, their voices moved softly through the temple, whispering prayers and incantations, words meant not for human ears but for the divine. These whispered tones created an atmosphere of stillness, a space where messages could pass unhindered between worlds. The priests did not treat dreams lightly. For them, every vision was like a tablet written in the script of heaven. And so, they studied in their libraries. Clay tablets lay stacked in neat rows, records of dreams gathered over centuries. Paired with their meanings, a lion seen in the night, a flood surging through streets. A door that would not open. All these images had been written down, compared, preserved. The priests consulted this archive with the care of a scholar and the devotion of a servant. Interpretation was never rushed. A priest listened closely to the dreamer's words, weighing every detail. The tone of the dream, the emotions it carried, even the timing of when it came, each mattered. A dream at dawn was thought to be different from one that arrived at midnight. A dream repeated 3 times carried far greater weight than a fleeting image glimpsed once. When the priest finally spoke, his words were measured, often given in hushed tones. For to speak wrongly was to misrepresent the gods, but to speak rightly, uncover the true meaning hidden within the dream, was to bring guidance, safety, and even healing. And so, within the walls of temples and palaces, the priests' whispers shaped lives. Kings listened. Merchants adjusted their journeys. Families made offerings or gave thanks. The priest was not simply interpreting a dream. He was opening a doorway to the divine. Night after night, beneath the same sky of stars, thousands lay down to sleep in Mesopotamia. Some were kings in vast palaces, others were farmers on reed mats near the river. Still others children lulled by the voices of their mothers, and in the silence of sleep, each one entered the same mysterious realm. The Mesopotamians believed that no boundary existed between the divine and the ordinary when it came to dreams. The gods could choose a ruler, a priest, a merchant, or even a child to carry a message. A dream was not earned by status. It was given. This belief filled the night with a kind of quiet dignity. The humblest sleeper, resting in the shadow of clay walls, might awaken with a vision that could alter the course of a family, a city, even a kingdom. Each dream carried the possibility of being more than imagination. It might be a whisper from beyond, and so the land between the rivers slept with reverence. To close one's eyes was not only to rest the body, but to open the soul. To dream was to become, if only for a moment, a messenger of the gods. In this way, every sleeper was part of something greater, a vast chorus of visions that bound humanity to the divine. And with dawn, those dreams, fragile, fleeting, but full of meaning, be spoken, interpreted, and, in some cases, set down in clay to endure for ages. To the people of Mesopotamia, dreams were not shadows of the mind. They were voices of the gods. And so, when a dream came, it was natural to ask which god has spoken. At the break of dawn, it was Shamash, the sun god, who often stood at the heart of dream visions. Shamash was the god of justice and truth, the light that pierced through darkness. When a dream seemed to carry clarity or judgment, when it revealed what was hidden, many believed it was his brilliance shining into the sleeper's soul. Shamash was the revealer, the one who uncovered what lay beneath. Yet dreams were not always gentle. Some arrive like storms, charged with passion and longing, filled with omens of desire or conflict. These belonged to Ishtar, the radiant goddess of love and war. She was fierce, unpredictable, and unbounded. In dreams she could bless with intimacy or strike with warning. To dream of her was to step into a realm of both beauty and danger. For Ishtar's presence was never neutral, and above them all loomed Marduk, the great city god of Babylon, whose power stretched over destiny itself. Marduk was a god of order, the one who conquered chaos and shaped the world from it. A dream marked by cosmic struggle or final victory bore his seal. When Marduk appeared, the vision was heavy with consequence. It meant fate itself was speaking. There were others too, who moved through dreams in subtler ways, spirits, ancestors, divine messengers who wore familiar faces, but always behind the imagery lay the sense of divine intent. No dream was thought to come from nowhere. Each was a thread woven from the voices of the gods into the fabric of human life. And so, when eyes closed in Mesopotamia, sleep was never truly silent. It was filled with voices, the radiant justice of Shamash, the fierce passion of Ishtar, the commanding presence of Marduk, and countless others guiding warning, reminding mortals that they were never beyond the sight of the divine. Not all dreams were left to chance. Sometimes, the people of Mesopotamia sought them out deliberately, stepping into the practice known as incubation, the ritual of sleeping, within the temple to invite a sacred vision. The process was not casual. One did not simply lie down and hope for a dream. There were steps to follow, each meant to prepare the dreamer for divine contact. First came purification ritual, washing in water, sometimes accompanied by fasting or offerings, as if to cleanse both body and soul. Next came prayer, whispered or sung in the presence of statues of the gods, calling upon them to enter the dream. Only then would the dreamer lie down in the temple itself. Some slept at the foot of towering ziggurats, others within the hushed inner chambers where incense still lingered in the air. Oil lamps glowed faintly, their flames like stars brought indoors. The atmosphere was heavy, not with fear, but with expectation. This was no ordinary sleep. It was an act of devotion. The dream that followed was believed to be different from those found in one's own home. It was sharper, closer to the divine, because it had been invited. In such dreams, gods might appear directly, offering instruction, healing, or prophecy. Shamash might illuminate a hidden truth. Ishtar might reveal the fate of love or war. Sometimes the dream offered no words at all, only symbols that priests would later help untangle. For the dreamer, the experience was unforgettable. To sleep beneath the gaze of the gods was to surrender wholly, to open one's mind as a vessel for messages that could alter the course of life. And so, in the silent temples of Mesopotamia, night after night, men and women sought visions. Their dreams were not only personal, they became part of the sacred archive of a culture that believed the gods were never far away, even in sleep. To the Mesopotamians, sleep was not a careless drift into darkness. It was a threshold, a crossing into a realm where the gods might speak. And just as one would not appear before a king in soiled clothes, neither could one approach the dream world unprepared. The ritual of purification began with water. A basin was filled from the river, cool and flowing, believed to carry the blessing of Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh waters. Bathing was more than cleansing. The skin it was a washing away of burdens, a symbolic renewal of the self before surrendering to the night. Then came the scents of incense, resin from distant lands, sweet-smelling woods, and herbs gathered along. The riverbanks were set to smolder. The smoke curled upward, like prayers turned visible, carrying intention toward the heavens. Each fragrance was chosen for its meaning: cedar for protection, myrrh for sanctity, juniper to drive away wandering. Spirits, oils, too, played their part. Pressed from olives or perfumed with flowers, they were rubbed upon the skin, soothing the body, calming the mind. Some were believed to carry protective powers, guarding the sleeper from restless demons of the night. And finally, prayers. Words, murmured softly, sometimes to Shamash for truth, sometimes to Ishtar for revelation, sometimes to personal gods who watched over households. These invocations were not grand speeches, but intimate appeals, like whispers to unseen listeners waiting. Just beyond the veil of dreams, only after these steps would the dreamer lie down to rest, purified and prepared. In the stillness that followed, with the scent of smoke lingering and the body fresh from the river, the sleeper was no longer an ordinary person awaiting rest. They were a vessel, cleansed and consecrated, ready to receive whatever vision the gods chose to send. Before lying down to sleep, it was common for the Mesopotamians to place offerings near the bed, the hearth, or at the threshold of the temple chamber where they would rest. These gifts were tokens of respect, gestures meant to invite the gods closer, to soften their gaze and open their voices in the realm of dreams. Food was among the simplest and most enduring offerings. A small loaf of barley bread, a handful of dates, or roasted grains might be placed upon a low altar. These were not meals for mortals, but shares for the divine, symbols of gratitude and welcome. By giving a portion of sustenance, the dreamer invited the gods to share in their life. Libations followed bowls of fresh water, cool beer brewed from barley, or sometimes milk or wine, depending on the household's means. The act of pouring itself was sacred, a gesture of flowing abundance. As the liquid trickled into its vessel, it was imagined as a bridge between earth and heaven, a signal that the dreamer sought communion. Alongside food and drink, small objects might be laid down as gifts: a polished bead, a carved token of clay, or a piece of fragrant resin. These were modest treasures, yet meaningful. Each object carried intention. The bead might symbolize protection, the resin purity, the token a request for remembrance. These offerings were not bribes, but invitations, quiet acts of devotion. To sleep without them was to risk neglecting the gods. To place them was to step into rest with reverence, acknowledging that dreams were not random, but relational, part of a conversation between mortal and divine. And so, the sleeper who left bread, poured water, and whispered thanks before lying down did more than prepare for rest. They entered the night with humility, opening themselves to visions that might come not by accident, but by grace. The Mesopotamians understood sleep as a vulnerable state. To drift into dreams was to leave the waking world behind, body stilled, senses softened, and soul wandering. And in that wandering, dangers lurked, not only from troubling visions, but from spirits that prowled the night. To guard against these unseen forces, sleepers turned to amulets and charms. These objects were small enough to rest upon the chest, to hang from the neck, or to place beneath the pillow or beside the bed. Each was crafted with meaning, believed to hold a spark of divine power strong enough to repel harm. Some were simple, beads of carnelian, lapis lazuli, or agate strung on a cord. Stones were not mere ornaments but vessels of strength. Lapis, with its deep sky blue, was linked to protection and favor from the heavens. Carnelian was thought to ward off evil. Others bore inscriptions. Clay tablets no larger than a palm might carry protective words pressed into them in cuneiform, invoking the aid of gods or demanding the retreat of restless spirits. These were charms made permanent, solid as the earth itself. Figurines, too, played their part. Tiny images of protective deities placed near the bed. The lion-headed goddess Lamassu, or images of Pazuzu, the fearsome demon who ironically guarded against worse demons, might be stationed like sentinels in the shadows. Though fearsome to look upon, their presence was comforting, for they stood watch where human eyes could not. Even knots tied in cords, worn around the wrist or laid upon the chest, were believed to hold power. The simple act of binding was thought to trap evil, preventing it from reaching the sleeper. With these charms, the Mesopotamian dreamer entered the night more secure, protected by stone, clay, inscription, and image. They surrendered to sleep, knowing that their body was guarded and their dreams could unfold without fear. For in order to receive the voices of the gods, one first had to keep the whispers of darker forces away. As darkness settled fully over the land, words rose softly into the night. For the Mesopotamians, speech was never ordinary, it carried weight, power, and presence. To speak aloud before sleep was to set boundaries around the soul's wandering, and to shape the path that dreams might take. Priests were the guardians of these chants. In temple courtyards and sleeping chambers, they recited verses preserved through generations, their voices low and rhythmic, like a steady drumbeat for the drifting mind. These words were not merely prayers but incantations, carefully chosen to invite safe passage into the dream world. Some chants called upon protective gods, Shamash, the sun god, who revealed truth even in darkness; Ea, the wise lord of the waters; Ishtar, whose visions often came in dreams of love and conflict. Each god's name was a lamp lit against the shadows. Others were designed to drive away harm. They spoke of demons fleeing, of doors sealed, of evil bound and cast away. The words themselves were believed to carry force, the sound shaping the unseen world, much like the reed stylus carved signs into clay. The cadence was slow, soothing, almost hypnotic. Chants often repeated phrases, lulling the mind while reinforcing their sacred power. In this rhythm, the listener felt both calm and secure, as though wrapped in a protective circle of sound. Even in ordinary households, families sometimes whispered these invocations together. Parents might murmur protective words over their children, ensuring the little ones would not be disturbed by nightmares. The repetition of familiar lines gave comfort, a reminder that the divine was listening. By the time the chanting faded, silence felt different no longer, empty but blessed, filled with the residue of sacred words. The sleeper then lay down, entering the night not alone, but accompanied by the resonance of voices meant to keep them safe until dawn. Among the rituals of the night, one practice stood apart in its quiet severity: fasting before sleep. While offerings were made to the gods with bread, dates, and beer, the dreamer himself might take nothing, choosing instead to enter the night with an empty stomach and a sharpened spirit. The act of fasting was more than denial, it was purification. To eat one's fill was to ground the body in the heaviness of the world, but to abstain was to lighten it, to make it receptive to messages that came not from earth but from the heavens. Hunger was not seen as weakness but as clarity, a cleansing flame that burned away distraction. For those seeking divine visions, kings, hoping for omens before battle, priests awaiting counsel, or ordinary people longing for guidance, was a way of signaling seriousness. It told the gods, I approach with discipline. I come prepared to listen. Even the timing mattered. Some traditions required abstaining from rich foods or heavy drink during the daylight hours, breaking only with a sip of water or a mouthful of bread at dusk. Others called for a longer abstinence, a full day and night without sustenance, so that the dreamer would slip into sleep already half unmoored from the body's demands. The sensation of lying down in hunger was not comfortable, but that discomfort itself became part of the ritual. As the stomach tightened and the senses grew sharper, the dreamer felt more open, more exposed. In this vulnerability, the gods' voices could be heard more distinctly. Thus the emptiness was not truly empty. It was a vessel, waiting to be filled with vision. Too fast before sleep was to clear the chamber of the body, so that whatever entered in dream would echo more powerfully, unclouded by indulgence or distraction. And when the dream it was remembered as clearer, brighter, as though the gods had spoken into a space made ready just for them. When words faded and chants fell silent, another form of offering lingered in the air: music. In the temple courtyards of Mesopotamia, the night was not always filled with quiet. Sometimes it shimmered with the delicate strains of lyres and the breathy sigh of flutes. The lyre, strung with gut and framed in wood, could be both solemn and soothing. Its notes fell like drops of water, steady and clear, creating a rhythm that mirrored the beating of the heart. Priests or temple musicians plucked its strings in slow patterns, each sound carrying upward toward the heavens, as if the gods themselves leaned down to listen. The flute, carved from reed or bone, released a sound more ethereal, thin, airy, like wind slipping through river reeds. In the stillness of night, its tones seemed almost unearthly, a bridge between the mortal and divine. Some believed these instruments called not only to the gods but to dreams themselves, coaxing them nearer. As though music could weave open the veil between worlds. In the city, music drifted beyond temple walls. A passerby in the street might catch the faint echo of strings carried on the river breeze. For families in their homes, the sound became a blessing at a distance, a gentle reassurance that sacred songs still guarded the night. Even within households, softer music was played. Fathers plucked small lyres to soothe children to sleep. Women hummed lullabies that carried the same power as priestly chants, reminding each listener that they rested beneath the gaze of gods. Music was more than beauty. It was protection, a spell carried not in words but in vibration. Each note softened fear, stilled restlessness, and steadied the heart. Where amulets guarded the body, music guarded the spirit, surrounding the sleeper in invisible harmonies. And when silence finally returned, it was not the same silence as before. It was richer, resonant, as though the air itself continued to hum, a perfect threshold for dreams to enter. In Mesopotamia, sleep was not seen as mere stillness, nor simply the body's retreat into rest. It was a crossing a passage from one realm to another. To close the eyes was to step away from the world of men and to approach the domain of gods. Spirits and mysteries that lingered just beyond waking sight. The act itself was gentle, almost unnoticed. A head lowered, breath slowed, the weight of the day slipped away like garments laid aside. Yet beneath that softness was a sacred transition. Sleep was the threshold, a doorway where the soul could drift, wander, and receive what waking ears could never hear. To the Mesopotamians, this threshold was a vulnerable place. The sleeper was unguarded, their body still while their spirit roamed. It was why chants, charms, and rituals mattered so deeply. They safeguarded the passage, ensuring the soul would travel toward divine visions rather than into shadow or nightmare. But it was also a place of promise. For within this threshold, dreams arrived not as idle illusions, but as gifts. A farmer might see a god granting signs of a good harvest. A king might be shown the fate of armies. A priest might be instructed in rituals to heal or protect the city. Each dream was more than a fleeting image. It was a message delivered across the border of sleep. Thus, falling asleep became a sacred act, just as one crossed a temple's gate with reverence. So too did one cross into the night with care, knowing that each breath carried them closer. Two voices, not of this world, in the hush of Mesopotamian nights, beneath the hum of lyres, the glow of oil lamps, and the distant whisper of rivers. Sleep itself became a temple gate, and the dreamer a pilgrim walking inward toward the divine. To the Mesopotamians, dreams were never simple. They could be doors to the gods, but they could also be trickery, shadows, or echoes of one's own restless mind. A dream was a gift, yes, but it was also a test. Not every vision deserved belief. Some dreams were thought to come from benevolent deities, offering guidance, protection, or warning. Others, however, were feared to come from darker spirits, intent on confusion or harm. The task of the dreamer and, often the priest, was to discern which was which. Clay tablets from ancient libraries speak of this distinction. They describe true dreams Jutu and false dreams Kalmu. A true dream was a message, carefully placed in the sleeper's mind by divine will. A false dream was a deception, a distortion, sometimes born from demons, sometimes from the dreamer's own anxieties. For kings, this difference was vital. A dream of victory might embolden an army, but, if false, it could lead to ruin. For a farmer, a vision of fertile fields might bring hope, but if untrustworthy, it could tempt him into reckless choices. Dreams had weight, and that weight demanded caution. Interpretation, therefore, was not passive. Priests and dream readers tested dreams against established signs, omens, and ritual frameworks. A dream's symbols were compared to ancient records, much like stars compared against constellations. Only if the vision aligned with sacred patterns could it be trusted. Even so, doubt lingered. To wake from a dream was to hold both wonder and uncertainty in one's hands. To ask, was this truly the voice of the gods or only the wandering of my own mind? And so every dream became a trial, not only for the dreamer but for the society around them. Each one carried the possibility of truth and the danger of deception. The night, it seemed, was not simply a place of gifts, but also of testing. To dream was to be offered a puzzle. To interpret it was to prove worthy of the gods' hidden speech. If priests were the voices that interpreted dreams, scribes were the hands that preserved them. In Mesopotamia, no figure held more subtle power than the scribe, the trained keeper of knowledge, the recorder of kings, and the guardian of memory itself. From a young age, chosen boys were sent to the Ediba, the tablet house. There they sat cross-legged with clay in hand, learning the long discipline of cuneiform, wedge pressed into wet earth, line upon line, until words and symbols became second nature. Hours of repetition carved not just tablets but the very minds of these students, shaping them into instruments of precision. The training was grueling. Students memorized proverbs, copied lists of signs, practiced names of plants, animals, and stars. Their hands grew steady, their eyes sharp. To falter was to invite ridicule from their teachers, and discipline was harsh. Yet from this strict order emerged a class of men uniquely equipped to capture the ephemeral thoughts, laws, prayers, and dreams into lasting form. Scribes served at every level of society. In the courts of kings, they recorded decrees, treaties, and omens. In temples, they wrote hymns, rituals, and sacred accounts. In markets, they tallied goods and contracts. Their work was both practical and sacred. Commerce on one tablet, divine messages on another. When it came to dreams, scribes became the bridge between worlds. What a sleeper whispered upon waking, the scribe pressed into clay. What a priest interpreted from symbols, the scribe preserved in wedge-shaped lines. Without them, dreams would vanish like smoke at dawn. With them, dreams endured, fixed, ordered, and capable of guiding not only one life, but generations. In this way, scribes stood at the edge of mystery. They did not dream the dreams, nor interpret them, but they ensured that no divine message was lost to time. In their hands, the fragile became eternal. The dream itself was fleeting, a vision of a river, a voice of a god, a shadow of warning, all dissolved quickly with the morning light. But in Mesopotamia, these fragile whispers were given form, shape, and permanence through clay. The clay tablet was not simply a tool, it was memory solidified. Soft river clay, gathered from the very earth between the Tigris and Euphrates, was shaped into small, palm-sized tablets. Smooth yet pliable, it awaited the touch of the scribe's reed. Stylus onto this surface, dreams were impressed. Each wedge-shaped mark was more than a sign, it was an attempt to capture what the mind had seen in sleep. Last night the king dreamed. A line might begin. A great star fell from the sky. Another might say, carefully, word by word, the scribe pressed the fleeting into the eternal. The process itself carried ritual weight. The act of writing was deliberate, slow, and reverent, as though the dream could vanish if hurried. Once inscribed, the clay was dried in the sun or hardened in a kiln, transforming soft earth into a tablet that could endure centuries. Thousands of these tablets have survived, stacked in temple libraries, buried in palace archives, and hidden in ruined cities. They are silent voices of dreamers long gone, yet still speaking. Kings and priests, farmers and merchant soul left traces of their nights upon clay. The clay tablet was more than a record. It was proof that dreams were worth preserving. It showed a culture unwilling to let the divine whispers fade away with dawn. In clay, the unseen world was made visible, and the passing breath of night became part of the lasting story of humankind. If clay was the canvas of Mesopotamian memory, the stylus was the brush. A simple reed, cut from the marshes that fringed the rivers, became the tool that gave permanence to fleeting dreams, shaped with care. Its end trimmed into a triangular point, the stylus carried both elegance and utility. With it, the scribe pressed wedge-shaped marks into soft clay, each impression angled with precision. One tilt of the stylus made a vertical stroke, another a diagonal, a third a simple wedge. From this limited set of marks, whole worlds of meaning emerged. To watch a scribe at work was to witness a quiet ritual. He leaned forward over the fresh tablet, stylus in hand, repeating softly the words spoken by the dreamer or the priest. Each press of reed into clay was a translation, thought to symbol, sound to sign, vision to permanence. There was a rhythm to it, the steady tapping of the stylus, the slight turn of the wrist, the pause to reflect before continuing. In that rhythm, the chaos of the dream was ordered. What had been intangible became structured. What had been fleeting became fixed. The stylus was not adorned with jewels or metals. It was ordinary, humble, yet through it, the voices of kings and the whispers of gods flowed onto clay. Without it, the dreams of Mesopotamia would have drifted away like mist. With it, they endure across millennia. In the hands of the scribe, the reed stylus was no mere tool. It was a bridge between worlds, from the divine to the dreamer, to the clay, and finally to us. Before the first light touches the rooftops, the dreamer sits with a priest or a scribe in a quiet room. The dream is still warm from the night images, close enough to touch, to catch it before it fades. The work begins at once. First, the clay. From a shallow bowl, the scribe lifts a soft mound of river clay. He kneads it slowly, folding and pressing until it is smooth and even, the way a singer clears the voice before a song. He shapes it into a small tablet, oval, pillow-shaped, or a neat rectangle that fits in the palm, then dampens the surface with a fingertip so it will take the marks cleanly. Second, the lines. With the flat edge of his reed stylus, the scribe gently rules faint guides across the surface. The tablet is now a small field ready for seed. Nothing written yet, but order has arrived. Third, the framing. At the top, he leaves space for a brief heading, the name of the dreamer, the day and month, sometimes the hour of the night, sometimes the god invoked. This is the doorway through which the dream will enter the world of record. Fourth, the telling. The dreamer speaks slowly. The priest may prompt. What came first? What did you feel? The scribe repeats each phrase under his breath and begins to press the wedges firm, angled, precise. Sound becomes sign. A star that fell, a river that rose, a door that would not open. Each image is given its place. If the dreamer hesitates, they pause. Nothing is rushed. The scribe prefers a faithful silence to a careless word. Fifth, the clarity. Details are gathered like loose threads. Was the lion gentle or fierce? Was the water clear or dark? Did the stranger speak a name? The scribe adds short clarifying lines in the same measured hands, so the meaning will not grow thin with time. Sixth, the interpretation. If a priest is present, a brief reading may follow 2 or 3 lines that bind the vision to known omens. Sometimes it is only a reference, as in the series of dreams, tablet 3, line so-and-so, so that another priest, in another season, can find the pattern again. 7th, the seal. When the writing is complete, the tablet is turned, and a space on the reverse is left for the colophon, the scribe's name, the temple or house. Sometimes a blessing. May the God who sent this speak plainly. If the dream is royal or of public concern, a cylinder seal is rolled across the edge, leaving a tiny procession of gods and beasts, a signature in images. 8th, the finishing. With a damp slip of clay, the scribe smooths any roughness at the margins. If the dream is sensitive, it may be enclosed in a thin clay envelope, another sheet wrapped around the tablet and sealed. The opening lines copied again on the outside so the contents can be known without breaking it. 9th, the hardening. The tablet rests in the sun to dry, or, for permanence, is set in a kiln until the clay turns firm and pale. What was once soft as river mud is now stone-minded, able to cross years and empires without forgetting. 10th, the placing. When cool, the tablet is carried to its shelf. In a temple library, it will stand on its edge, among others, arranged by subject and opening line. A scribe makes a short note in a catalogue. If a man dreams, a star falls upon his house. The first words become its name, the way a lullaby is known by its beginning, and that is all. A night's breath has become earth and sin. The vision that might have vanished with the morning fire is now a quiet object in the world, something you can hold, weigh, and return to. Through careful hands and patient marks, a dream has learned how to endure. Household shelf. Many were carried to the heart of the city, into the great repositories, where words themselves were guarded like treasures. The temple library was a sanctum of clay and order. Inside, rows of low shelves held hundreds, sometimes thousands of tablets, each one a voice from a night long gone. They leaned upright, arranged with care, their edges inked with short markings so they could be recognized at a glance. To step inside such a chamber was to stand among countless nights of dreaming. The palace library was more ambitious still. Kings who hungered for knowledge gathered tablets from every corner of their realm, omens, chronicles, hymns, medical texts, and among them, the tablets of dreams. Here, scribes worked not only as recorders, but as catalogers. They created indexes and lists, the ancient forerunners of our library's catalogs, so that a priest might find a dream about rivers, or lions, or stars, without wandering endlessly through shelves. These libraries were not silent. Clay clinked softly as scribes lifted and replaced tablets. The air smelled faintly of dust and baked earth. Light slanted through small windows, falling on neat piles of visions given form. It was a place where the voices of the gods and the questions of men met upon orderly shelves. Dream libraries were more than archives. They were instruments of power. For a ruler, having at hand the omens of past centuries meant entering the future with the weight of precedent. For a priest, being able to quote not just a memory but a written record gave authority to interpretation. And for the people, the knowledge that dreams could be stored forever brought comfort. The night's fleeting visions would not vanish, and so, in temples and palaces, the Mesopotamians created vast storehouses of dreams, rooms where the voices of the gods lingered in clay, waiting patiently to be read again, even centuries after the dreamer had returned to dust. among the countless dream tablets that lay in temple and palace libraries. One collection rose above the rest. The Ikerzak, the series of the Zak. The Whisper Spirit. This was no single tablet, but a vast handbook of many, a catalogue of dreams and their meanings, gathered and ordered across generations. It was, in a sense, the world's first dream dictionary. What it contained. The Ikerzak arranged dreams by theme, animals, stars, buildings, water, flight, shadows. Each entry began the same way. If a man dreams. What followed was a vision. A lion at the door, a river overflowing, a star falling into the lap, and then its interpretation. The verdict was brief, often a single line. It means the favor of the king, or, it means death will come. Why it mattered. In a world where dreams were voices of the gods, to collect them was to gather fragments of divine speech. To consult the series was to stand on the shoulders of dreamers who had come before. A priest could say, "Your dream of fire in the courtyard was seen before, in the days of a king long dead, and it meant plague." Knowledge became continuity. The gods' patterns became visible. How it was used. Scribes trained with the series, memorizing its entries as students today memorize law or medicine. Priests carried its authority into courts and temples. Merchants and farmers, who might never see the tablets themselves, lived under its shadow. For its interpretations echoed in sermons, rituals, and the words of advisors. The spirit behind the name. The title itself, Zak, the breath, the whisper. The spirit that flits between waking and sleeping captured the essence of dreams. They were not solid, but vaporous, a breath caught in clay. And yet, once written into the series, they became fixed, dependable, a guide that kings could hold in their hands. The Ikerzak was more than a book of dreams. It was a map of the uncertain night. For the Mesopotamians, it transformed the chaos of visions into a landscape with paths, warnings, and lights to follow. Through it, the night's mysteries became legible, enduring, and, in a way, almost predictable. Not all dreams were alike. The Mesopotamians knew this well and gave careful thought to the kinds of visions that came in the night. To them, dreams were not a single language, but many dialects, some gentle, some stern, some radiant, and some dark. One dreams as omens. The most common were omens, signs that pointed toward events yet to come. A dream of a flood might foreshadow famine, while a vision of lions at the gate might predict the rise of an enemy. These dreams were warnings, but they were also opportunities to prepare, to change, to act before disaster arrived. To dreams as visions. Some dreams were not about tomorrow, but about eternity. These were visions, glimpses of the divine world. A man might see Shamash rising in brilliance, or Ishtar clothed in stars, or stand in a temple not of earth but of heaven. Such dreams were treasured as revelations, tokens of favor from the gods themselves. 3. Dreams as warnings. Others came not to bless but to rebuke. To dream of falling, of fire consuming one's house, of darkness spreading over the city. These were stern messages. They demanded correction, the making of offerings, the turning away from arrogance, the plea for mercy before the gods, for dreams as blessings. And still, some dreams were gifts of peace. A mother might dream of holding her child beneath a fruitful tree, a farmer might see his fields golden with harvest. A king might dream of victory, and hear the voices of the gods promising protection. These dreams strengthened the heart, offering hope and courage for the days ahead. The scribes and priests of Mesopotamia understood that to record dreams was not only to preserve memory but to sort them into meaning. Each clay tablet became a branch on a great tree of categories, stretching upward toward the heavens. For them, dreams were not chaos. They were order waiting to be read, omens to heed, visions to revere, warnings to fear, blessings to cherish. And in this order lay the quiet conviction that the night was not a void, but a conversation. In Mesopotamia, the dreams of kings carried a weight beyond any others, for in their sleep, it was believed, the gods whispered not only to men but to nations. A single dream could sway the course of war, decide the building of temples, or change the fate of an empire. The royal sleeper. Unlike the farmer or merchant, the king was thought to rest closer to the divine. His chambers were sanctified, his bed purified, his dreams carefully guarded. When a ruler closed his eyes, priests waited anxiously, for what visions he brought back at dawn might shape the destiny of thousands. Dreams as commands. It was not uncommon for a king to announce at court, "Last night, the God spoke to me." From such proclamations came great undertakings, the digging of canals, the marching of armies, the founding of new cities. These were not framed as personal wishes, but as divine commands. To ignore a royal dream was to risk ignoring the gods themselves. Dreams of victory and defeat. In times of war, dreams were watched with even greater care. A dream of a collapsing wall might warn of a siege gone wrong. A vision of an eagle soaring above the enemy camp might promise triumph. Kings often delayed or advanced battles based on what they had seen in the silence of the night. The role of priests. Yet kings were not alone in deciphering. The court priests, skilled in the language of the Ikerzak, stood ready to interpret. They could confirm that the king's dream meant divine favor, or else caution that it hid a shadow. A ruler might awaken with fire in his heart, but the words of a priest could temper it with warning or fan it into action. The legacy of dreaming rulers. The chronicles of Mesopotamia remember kings who dreamed greatly. Some claimed that Marduk himself had appeared to them with promises of dominion. Others recorded dreams that foretold floods, rebellions, or the rise of rival dynasties. These stories were not written as curiosities, they were part of history, woven into the official memory of the land. For the people of Mesopotamia, when a king dreamed, the realm itself listened. His visions became the laws of the night, shaping the battles of the day. Not every dream belonged to kings and temples. Most rose quietly from the reed mats of farmers, the shaded courtyards of merchants, and the small, crowded homes of families living by the river. These dreams carried no armies, no decrees, no grand battles, but they carried lives, dreams of the harvest. For farmers, the rhythm of life was measured in planting and reaping. A dream of a swollen river might cause fear of flooded fields. A vision of golden barley bending in the wind could stir hope for abundance. The gods were thought to speak through such signs, revealing what the next season might hold. Dreams of family. For mothers and fathers, dreams often circled around children. A dream of a child smiling beneath a fruitful tree might be taken as a blessing of health. A dream of a child lost in darkness could send parents rushing to the temple with offerings. In a world where life was fragile, every dream about family was treated with deep seriousness. dreams of daily struggles. Merchants might dream of scales tipping unfairly, fearing deception in the marketplace. Shepherds could dream of wolves, omens of danger to their flocks. Even craftsmen, potters, weavers, builders, sometimes dreamed of broken tools or fires consuming their work. Anxieties shaped into divine warnings, dreams as shared stories. Unlike kings, who had priests to record their visions, commoners shared their dreams aloud, in courtyards at dawn or in fields at midday. Neighbors might nod gravely, offer advice, or suggest a visit to a local shrine. Dreams became part of the fabric of community life, retold, debated, and sometimes laughed over. Small but sacred, though humbler than royal visions, these dreams mattered. The gods of Mesopotamia were not distant. They touched the lives of ordinary men and women. Every sleeper, no matter how poor, might be chosen as a vessel for divine speech. And so, the dreams of commoners, of bread, of children, of fields were treated with a quiet reverence. For while the kings dreamed of empires, the people dreamed of survival. And in those small, tender visions lay the true heartbeat of Mesopotamia. Dreams, by nature, are fragile. They dissolve with the rising sun, slipping away like mist upon the river. In Mesopotamia, the task of rescuing these fleeting visions from oblivion fell to the scribes, the sacred duty, for a scribe, recording dreams was not a casual act of writing. It was service to both gods and men. Each tablet pressed with cuneiform signs carried the weight of the divine, for it was believed that what the dreamer had seen was a message meant to endure. A meditative rhythm, scribes worked in a deliberate quiet, the stylus tapped and pressed into clay, line by line, sign by sign. The act itself became almost meditative, a rhythm of breathing, a stillness of mind. In this discipline, there was reverence, not simply for the craft of writing, but for the unseen voices captured in the dream. Between silence and speech, often the dreamer spoke softly, recounting the visions of the night. The scribe listened, intently translating words into signs, thoughts into permanence. There was an intimacy in this exchange, one person unburdening their hidden night, the other giving it shape and weight that could outlast generations. Guardians of memory, what scribes preserved was not merely private. Many tablets were stored in temple archives and royal libraries to be studied, compared, and interpreted across time. A dream written once might be consulted decades later, its meaning reconsidered in a new age. In this way, scribes became guardians of collective memory, a silent devotion. Though they rarely stood in the light of kings or priests, scribes carried a quiet authority. Their diligence ensured that the divine whispers of the night were not lost in the noise of day. With every stroke of the stylus, they bridged the fragile world of dreams and the enduring record of civilization. And so, in the hush of clay rooms and lamplight, dreams that might have died with the dawn instead found life everlasting in the hands of the scribes. For the people of Mesopotamia, water was life. The rivers Tigris and Euphrates nourished the fields, fed the flocks, and carried trade to distant lands. Yet water could also destroy, in the sudden violence of floods, or the creeping hunger of drought. And so, when water appeared in dreams, it was never taken lightly. The flow of rivers, to dream of a calm flowing river, was often read as a sign of continuity, abundance, and the favor of the gods. A dreamer might wake with hope, believing that their household or harvest would be blessed with steady growth. Just as the river carried its waters faithfully downstream, floods and turbulence. But when the river swelled beyond its banks, when floods surged in the dream world, the meaning turned darker. Such visions could warn of danger, loss of crops, the anger of the gods, or chaos in the city. Floods were reminders of forces too vast to control, whether natural or divine, wells and hidden depths. Dreams of wells carried subtler meanings. A well was both life-giving and mysterious, water drawn from the unseen depths below. To dream of a clear well could signify hidden wisdom, blessings yet to be discovered. But if the water was murky, or if the well was empty, the dreamer might be warned of deceit, scarcity, or unfulfilled hopes. Water as divine voice, because water sustained the world. Its appearance in dreams was often taken as the gods speaking directly. A river might not just be a river, it could be a path set by the divine. A flood might not just be water, it could be a warning to act quickly, to prepare to respect forces beyond human reach. And so, in the fragile quiet of dawn, when a dreamer recounted visions of rivers, floods, or wells, scribes and priests listened carefully, for in the land between two great rivers, water in dreams was never mere imagery. It was the language of survival, the whisper of gods, the mirror of fate. The Mesopotamian world was alive with animals, some wild and fearsome, others close companions in the home or the field. Each carried symbolic weight, shaped by daily life, myth, and the ever-watchful presence of the gods. To dream of an animal was never trivial. It was to glimpse power, danger, loyalty, or blessing in a language older than words. The lion, power and judgment. The lion roamed both the wilderness and the stories of kings. It was the beast of strength, authority, and divine trial. To see a lion in a dream might signify a ruler's might or the god's testing of courage. If the lion was calm, it meant protection. If it attacked, it could warn of looming conflict or punishment. The snake, transformation and hidden forces. Snakes slithered in the reeds and ruins, creatures both feared and revered. In dreams, they were signs of danger, secrecy, or change. A snake shedding its skin might be read as renewal, while a striking snake could portend betrayal or divine wrath. The serpent spoke of what lay hidden beneath the surface of waking life. The bird messengers of the sky, birds, moving freely between earth and heaven, were often symbols of messages or omens. A bird in flight might mean news on the horizon, or a soul lifted toward freedom. But a bird falling, or trapped, could warn of misfortune, loss, or divine displeasure. Their wings were pages on which the gods sometimes wrote their signs. The dog, loyalty and guardianship. Dogs were companions, protectors, and guides. In dreams, they could embody faithfulness, friendship, or the guarding of the household. Yet, if a dog snarled or attacked, the vision might be read as betrayal from someone trusted, or dangers approaching from within one's circle. The cattle, abundance and sustenance. Cattle filled the fields and the tables of Mesopotamia, too. Dream of strong, healthy cattle often promised prosperity, full harvests, and the god's blessing of fertility. But weak or dying cattle carried a grim weight, warnings of famine, hardship, or divine withdrawal, animals as divine echoes. To the dreamer, each animal was more than its earthly form. It was a sign, a messenger, sometimes even a mask worn by the gods themselves. The lion, the snake, the bird, the dog, the cattle, each in its way revealed truths about the balance of strength and frailty, blessing and danger, life and death. And so animals in dreams walked a double world, one of flesh and fur, and one of symbol and shadow. In Mesopotamia, food was not only nourishment, but also a sacred bond between families, between communities, and between mortals and gods. To dream of meals, of bread, of honey, or of banquets was to dream of life itself, wrapped in symbols of plenty, gratitude, and sometimes warning. Bread, the daily gift. Bread was the foundation of the Mesopotamian table. To dream of warm, whole loaves was often a promise of stability and provision, the assurance that the household would not go hungry. But broken bread, or bread that crumbled to dust, could whisper of scarcity or strife within the family. Honey, sweetness of blessing. Rare and precious, honey carried a different weight in dreams. To taste honey was to taste joy, good fortune, or divine favor. Honey in a dream was often read as a symbol of abundance beyond mere survival. The sweetness of life, gifts poured generously by the gods, meals shared. To sit at a table and eat among others was a vision of community and peace. Dreams of shared meals often pointed toward harmony, alliances, or reconciliation after quarrels. They were reminders that food was more than sustenance, it was connection, a weaving together of lives. The banquet, feast, or warning. The image of a grand banquet could carry both light and shadow. On one hand, it symbolized prosperity, honor, and the favor of the gods. On the other, too much food, or a feast that grew chaotic, might be a warning against excess, greed, or the fleeting nature of wealth. The divine table. Sometimes, dreamers told of sitting at a table not of this world, a table of shining bread and golden cups. Such visions were thought to be encounters with the gods themselves, who welcomed mortals to partake, if only in dreams, of eternal abundance. In the hush of dawn, when the dreamer recounted their feast or their bread, the scribe listened with care. For every meal in a dream was more than hunger satisfied. It was a message, a symbol, a reminder that even in the silent hours of night, the gods set a table before the sleeping mind. The Mesopotamian dreamscape was filled with the moods of the sky. Storms and weather were never mere accidents of nature. They were voices, declarations, and warnings from the divine. To dream of thunder, of rain, or of the unrelenting sun was to witness the power of forces larger than human life. Forces that could both bless and destroy. Thunder, the voice of the gods. A dream filled with thunder was often read as an omen of authority. The sound rolling across the sky could be the judgment of Enlil, the storm god, or the command of other deities who ruled the heavens. Sometimes it was a sign of battle or dispute. Other times, a call to awaken to destiny. To dream of thunder was to feel the gods speak, not in words, but in echoes that shook the soul. Rain, blessing, and renewal. The rains that fell upon the land were lifeblood for Mesopotamia. In dreams, rain was often a sign of fertility, growth, and divine favor. A steady rainfall could promise flourishing crops and full rivers. Yet too much rain, flooding, and overwhelming might be a warning of imbalance, disaster, or punishment. Echoes of the Great Flood remembered in legend. The scorching sun, trial and illumination. The sun was life itself, but in dreams its power could take many forms. A warm, golden light might mean clarity, revelation, or the guidance of Shamash, the sun god, who brought truth to light. Yet a burning, merciless sun, beating down without relief, could signify hardship, exhaustion, or divine testing. In such dreams, the sleeper was reminded of both the sun's blessing and its danger. The weather as divine language for the dreamer. The sky was a canvas painted by the gods. Thunder, rain, and blazing sun carried meanings deeper than their earthly form. They spoke of cycles of trial and relief, destruction and renewal, punishment and mercy. To wake from such dreams was to carry a message written not on clay, but on the winds and storms of the night. And so, Mesopotamians learned to listen not only to their own visions, but to the heavens above, which thundered, wept, and burned their messages into the dreaming heart. In Mesopotamian dreams, the image of a road was never just a road. To walk along a path, to cross a riverbank, or to journey toward a distant horizon was to step into the language of destiny. The road was the line that joined past and future. The thread spun by the gods, stretching before the dreamer's feet. The open road, a dream of walking freely along a straight and open road, was a sign of clarity, guidance, and purpose. Such a vision often meant that the dreamer's path in life was blessed and unhindered. Their steps aligned with the will of the gods. The fork in the path, dreams of crossroads, or divided paths were treated with great seriousness. A fork in the road symbolized choice, a moment of decision that could alter the dreamer's fate. To turn left or right in a dream was not random. It was a sign that the dreamer's waking life held an important turning point. The endless journey. Some dreamers spoke of long journeys, with no end in sight, across deserts or winding rivers. Such dreams could reflect uncertainty, the burden of exile, or the struggle of one who wandered far from their purpose. Yet they could also be read as signs of perseverance, that the journey itself, however long, was sacred. Barriers and obstacles. To find the road blocked by stones, rivers, or walls was a warning of delay or difficulty. These obstacles were believed to mirror the unseen struggles of the waking world, urging the dreamer to prepare for trials ahead. The road as destiny. Every road in a dream was more than a path, it was a story unfolding. The Mesopotamians saw themselves as travelers in a vast cosmic order, their steps guided, slowed, or redirected by divine will. To dream of journeys was to glimpse the map of fate, traced faintly in the dust of the road, in the quiet of dawn. When the dreamer recounted such visions, the scribe pressed them carefully into clay, for each road described was not just a dream. It was a path into the future, a whisper of destiny hidden in the night. In the dream lore of Mesopotamia, family was more than blood and kinship. It was the very fabric of society, the foundation upon which cities and temples stood. To dream of marriage, of children, or of family life was to glimpse not only personal fortune but also the larger harmony of the world. Marriage as union and covenant. A dream of marriage was rarely seen as simple celebration. Instead, it was often interpreted as the joining of forces, the blending of households, destinies, or even kingdoms. For rulers, such dreams might foretell alliances or political unions. For ordinary people, A marriage in a dream might signal prosperity, stability, or the resolution of disputes. Yet sometimes, it could carry warnings, a false union, or one bound to bring conflict. Children as signs of the future. Children, in dreams, embodied beginnings, fresh lives, and untold possibilities. To dream of a newborn might mean the coming of good fortune, the birth of new projects, or the blessing of fertility upon the household. A child laughing or playing was a sign of joy to come, while a crying child could warn of hardship, illness, or neglect. Dreams of twins or multiple children often carried strong meanings, interpreted by scribes as symbols of abundance or divine intervention. The household's continuity, because Mesopotamian families were built around lineage, inheritance, and duty to the gods. Dreams of children and marriages were never just private matters. They were threads woven into the larger tapestry of community and destiny. A family prospering in dreams meant a city in harmony. A family in discord could reflect unrest or imbalance in the wider world. The divine blessing of family. The gods themselves were often tied to marriage and children. Ishtar, goddess of love and fertility, was invoked in matters of union. Nintu, the birth goddess, was called upon for safe delivery of children. Dreams that touched on these sacred themes were seen as divine messages, blessings, or sometimes stern reminders of responsibility. In the quiet of dawn, as dreamers told their visions of weddings and children, the scribes recorded them with care. For such dreams were not fleeting images of the night. They were glimpses of life's deepest continuities, the echoes of family stretching across generations. In Mesopotamian nights, dreams of the dead carried a weight unlike any other. They were not dismissed as simple echoes of memory but were treated as real encounters. Doors briefly opened between the world of the living and the shadowed realm below, the land of no return. The Mesopotamians believed the afterlife was a dim kingdom, known as the land where dust is their food and clay their bread. To dream of this realm was to brush against mysteries most mortals dared not approach in waking life. Ancestral visitations. When ancestors appeared in dreams, they were not imagined figures but messengers from the underworld. A father long gone, a mother buried years before, or a forgotten relative might return in the silence of sleep. Such appearances were often interpreted as guidance, reminders of duties left unfinished, or blessings passed down through generations, voices of warning and comfort. The words spoken by the dead in dreams were weighed with great seriousness. A smiling ancestor could bring reassurance, protection, or signs of prosperity. A stern or silent figure might foretell hardship, urging the dreamer to perform rituals of remembrance, offerings of food and drink to ease their unrest in the afterlife. Ritual responses. Upon waking, those who dreamed of the departed often brought offerings to temples or poured libations at family altars. Bread, beer, and incense were laid out to honor the dead and soothe their wandering spirits. Dreams thus created bridges of duty, acts of devotion that bound the living and the dead together. Dreams as sacred bonds. In this way, dreams of ancestors reminded Mesopotamians that family ties did not end with burial. The dead lived on in memory, in ritual, and in the nightly passages of the dream world. Each visitation was both solemn and sacred, a quiet whisper from the shadows that the lineage continued unbroken. Not all dreams were gentle whispers or guiding visions. Some were storms of terror, pressing upon the sleeper with shadows that felt more real than waking life. In Mesopotamia, nightmares were not dismissed as accidents of the mind, they were believed to be invasions, incursions from forces both divine and monstrous. The weight of the night, to awaken trembling, heart racing, was to know that something dark had crossed the threshold. These experiences were treated with caution. Priests and dream interpreters listened intently to the dreamer's words. For behind the terror lay warnings of unseen dangers. Lamashtu, the devourer of children, among the most feared figures, was Lameshtu, a demoness who preyed upon mothers and infants. She was imagined with the head of a lioness, the teeth of a donkey, talons of a bird, and the body of a woman. To dream of her was a dire omen, a threat to fertility, childbirth, or the survival of the household. Amulets and incantations were urgently employed to ward her away, her presence a signal that protective rituals must be renewed. Pazuzu, the fierce guardian. Strangely, another dreaded figure, Pazuzu, was both feared and revered. With a grotesque face, the wings of a bird, the claws of a lion, and a serpent's tail, he embodied the wild chaos of disease and storms. Yet people also called upon him to banish Lameshtu and lesser demons. To dream of Pazuzu was unsettling, but it could also mean protection, a terrifying ally who fought darker things that haunted the night. Restless spirits. Not all nightmares came from demons. Some were caused by the unsettled dead spirits who had not received proper burial rites or offerings. They drifted into dreams, bringing illness, confusion, or unshakable fear. Their presence in visions was a reminder of obligations neglected, rituals left undone. The healing response. When plagued by nightmares, the sleeper often turned to ritual. Chants before dawn, incense burned to purify the chamber, charms placed under pillows, and offerings poured out to the gods. For Mesopotamians, every nightmare demanded attention, for it was never merely just a dream. It was a call. To act, to protect, to remember the unseen powers that moved through the darkness. For every dark vision that visited the sleeper, the Mesopotamians had ways to answer. Dreams, whether whispered by the gods or twisted by demons, could not be ignored. They were part of a larger world, a world where the unseen reached into the fragile stillness of the night. Protective rituals gave balance, offering sleepers the courage to close their eyes again. Sacred words against shadows. Incantations were among the oldest defenses. Priests and healers recited long, flowing chants before a sleeper rested, or upon waking from a troubling vision. Words themselves carried power, their rhythm binding the restless spirits and sending them back to the darkness. The power of incense and smoke, fragrant resins, cedar, myrrh, juniper, were burned so that their smoke might cleanse the air of hostile presences. Inhaling the scent was thought to steady the heart, while the rising plumes formed a bridge between human prayers and divine hearing. Water as purifier. Bowls of clean water were sometimes placed near the bedside, reflecting lamplight like small, protective mirrors. Sprinkled upon the dreamer, the water symbolically washed away evil influences. Flowing water, especially from the great rivers, was believed to carry away whatever clung to the soul after a nightmare. Amulets and talismans, figures of protective spirits. Small carvings of Pazuzu etched stones inscribed with sacred words, or tiny clay tablets pressed with symbols were placed near the pillow or worn around the neck. These objects were guardians in miniature, constant companions against the unseen, morning rites of release. If an evil dream lingered, it was sometimes recited aloud at dawn to the rising sun, as if passing the burden to Shamash, the god of justice and light. Speaking, the nightmare broke its hold. Silence, by contrast, allowed it to fester, the gentle assurance of ritual. Through these practices, the people of Mesopotamia softened the edges of the night. The dreamer, no longer helpless, could rest in the knowledge that chants, incense, water, and sacred charms created a shield. The world of dreams remained mysterious, but it was not unguarded. To the Mesopotamian mind, no fragment of a dream was without weight. A single feather, a broken jug, the way a doorway opened, all carried meaning. Where modern thought might brush such details aside as fragments of imagination, ancient interpreters leaned in closer, believing that the gods spoke in whispers as much as in thunder. The smallest signs, a drop of spilled oil, a flicker of flame, the direction of a bird's flight in a vision, these were not background noise. They were signals carefully recorded on clay tablets and examined with as much seriousness as the grander themes of kings or armies. Context was everything. The meaning of a dog in a dream, for instance, could shift depending on whether it barked or lay still, whether it appeared at dawn or in the middle of the night, whether it approached from the left or the right. Subtle changes reshaped the message entirely. The layered world. Dreams were not simple pictures, but layered puzzles. The Mesopotamians believed that gods could cloak truth in symbols, requiring human patience to peel back their meaning. A dream of bread might not be about hunger at all, but about abundance, fertility, or even divine favor withheld. Attention as reverence. By treating every detail with care, dream interpreters showed respect, not only to the dreamer, but to the gods themselves. To miss a small sign was to risk misunderstanding the will of heaven, a mistake that could bring harm upon households or kingdoms. The quiet discipline. Thus, scribes and priests practiced a kind of listening beyond words. Their work was slow, deliberate, shaped by the conviction that nothing in a dream was meaningless. Even silence, even the forgotten fragments upon waking, had a place in the web of divine communication. Among the oldest stories ever told, the Epic of Gilgamesh carries within it a treasury of dreams. These visions were not ornaments to the tale, but guiding lights, shaping the fate of kings and heroes. In its verses, the people of Mesopotamia saw reflected their own belief that sleep was a threshold where mortals could glimpse the divine. Dreams before friendship. Gilgamesh, restless in the early days of his reign, dreamed of a great star falling from the heavens. It was heavy, impossible to lift, and yet his heart loved it. To his mother, the goddess Ninsun, the dream foretold the arrival of Enki, the wild man who would become his closest companion. A second dream, of an axe appearing in Uruk's streets, carried the same meaning. Friendship itself was revealed as destiny through symbols in the night, dreams of the journey. Later, when Gilgamesh and Enkidu prepared to confront Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest, dreams again whispered warnings. The hero saw mountains collapsing, lightning splitting the skies, fires blazing in the dark. Though fearful, Ninsun assured him these visions promised protection, that Shamash, the sun god, would stand beside him. What seemed like terror was in truth reassurance, cloaked in thunder. The dreams of loss. When Enkidu was struck with illness, he too was visited by visions, dreams of the underworld, of being dragged to a shadowed house where dust was the only food and silence the only song. These night messages prepared both him and Gilgamesh for the sorrow to come, reminding listeners that dreams could soften the edge of fate by revealing it before it fell. The power of the epic. Through Gilgamesh, Mesopotamians found proof of their own faith in dreams, that they were not illusions but windows into the plans of gods, guardians, and destiny. The clay tablets of the epic preserved not only deeds of battle and grief, but also the intimate, trembling visions that guided a king through friendship, fear, and loss. Long after Gilgamesh, another king's dreams became legendary. Gudea of Lagash, who ruled in the late 3rd millennium BCE, was remembered not for conquest but for his devotion to the gods. His reign shines in history because of a single vision, a dream that commanded him to build a temple, the sleeper at rest. One night, as the king lay upon his bed, sleep overtook him with unusual weight. The air was hushed, the lamps burned low, and the silence of the Mesopotamian plain seemed to gather around him. In that silence, a dream descended. The vision, Gudea saw a towering figure, the god Ningirsu, radiant and powerful. At his side stood a divine architect with a measuring rod, while a goddess of writing traced symbols upon a tablet. They presented Gudea with a vision of a grand sanctuary, its walls already drawn in heavenly lines. Though the dream was layered in mystery, its meaning pressed upon his heart. The gods desired a house of stone and brick, where heaven and earth might meet, seeking interpretation. When the king awoke, he did not dismiss his dream as fancy. Instead, he turned to the priests and diviners, men trained to read the silent language of the night. They confirmed what Gudea suspected: the gods had given him a holy task. To disobey would be dangerous. To obey was to invite blessing. The temple built. So Gudea gathered his people, summoned builders and artisans, and set about constructing the great temple of Ningirsu in Lagash. Each brick, each carved doorway, carried not only human labor, but the weight of divine instruction first whispered in sleep why it endured. The story of Gudea's dream endured for centuries because it captured the very essence of Mesopotamian belief that the gods chose the night as their council hall, that visions in sleep could move kings to shape the waking world. In the vast halls of Assyria, where stone reliefs showed lions falling before the king's arrows and armies marching in endless ranks, dreams carried a weight as heavy as iron. For these rulers, war was not only a matter of soldiers and steel, but of omens, signs that might tilt the balance between victory and ruin. Before great campaigns, kings sought the language of the night. They wished to know, would the gods march with them or against them? In the stillness before dawn, they waited for visions to come. A river might appear in a dream, its waters breaking their banks, a sign that their armies would overflow and consume the enemy. A lion subdued at the feet of a hunter could mean triumph, while a broken bow might warn of defeat. The Assyrian kings did not dream in silence. Priests and scribes stood ready, prepared to capture each symbol in clay. These interpretations were not mere guesses, they came from centuries of collected wisdom. The vast libraries of Nineveh and Ashur, where the dream books held thousands of examples. Each image had its precedent, each vision its pattern. The king's private sleep became part of a tradition older than his throne, and in times of uncertainty, when the night brought troubling visions, kings sought reassurance in ritual. Offerings of incense and bread were made to the gods. Priests recited protective chants to purify the camp. Sometimes, a substitute king was enthroned for a few days, a ritual scapegoat, so that ill omens would fall upon him instead, sparing the true ruler. In this way, dreams were woven into the very fabric of Assyrian power. Wars were planned not only with maps and strategies, but with the whispered guidance of the night. To dream was to glimpse the battlefield before a single sword was drawn, a secret advantage, or a warning that no general could ignore. In Babylon, the city of hanging gardens and towering ziggurats, kings ruled not only with armies and laws but with the silent guidance of dreams. The Babylonian throne was more than a seat of earthly power. It was a station watched by the gods, and at night the gods often spoke. Dreams in the palace. When darkness fell over the Euphrates, the royal chambers became places of listening. A king lying down to sleep was not merely a man seeking rest. He was a ruler awaiting counsel from the unseen. For Babylonians, a single dream could carry the weight of a decree, steering the fate of the city and the empire beyond its gates. Nebuchadnezzar's visions. Among the most famous Babylonian rulers, Nebuchadnezzar II was remembered in later traditions as a dreamer of great and troubling visions. In stories that survived, he saw colossal figures of gold and clay, mighty trees reaching to the heavens, omens of kingdoms rising and falling. Such dreams, whether rooted in history or legend, reflected the deep Babylonian conviction that even the vast plans of empires were whispered. First in sleep, advisors of the night. Babylonian kings did not interpret dreams alone. Priests, scribes, and diviners gathered in the palace courts, reading the symbols with patience and care. Clay tablets from the great libraries record thousands of interpretations. If a lion appears, it is strength. If a snake, a hidden enemy. If water floods the land, a challenge from the gods. With such keys, they unlocked the meaning of royal visions, dreams as policy. At times, dreams confirmed a king's decision to go to war or to build. At other times, they warned against ambition. The ruler who ignored a troubling dream risked not only failure but divine anger. To heed the night was to govern wisely. To neglect it was to invite ruin. The Babylonian legacy. In Babylon, dreams were never private. The visions of a king belonged to the empire itself, shaping the lives of countless people. They were, in a sense, messages for the whole city, carried first to the ruler's mind in sleep, then written into law, stone, and history. Not all dreams belonged to kings and priests. In the villages along the canals, in the small houses clustered near the fields, the common people also dreamed. Their visions were not pressed into royal tablets, but they lived on in whispers, in fireside conversations, and in the rhythm of oral tradition. Evening gatherings, when the work of the day was finished, when the plows rested, the ovens cooled, and the stars scattered across the Mesopotamian sky, families gathered outside their homes. It was in these quiet hours that dreams were retold. A farmer might speak of a lion that stalked him in sleep. A mother might recall a dream of her child running through a golden field. A shepherd might describe a vision of storm clouds rising over his flock. The village as interpreter, without scribes or libraries, interpretation belonged to the community. Elders, wise through years of listening, weighed each story carefully. They drew on fragments of tradition, sayings passed from ancestor to ancestor. If you dream of bread, it is a sign of plenty. If you dream of fire, be wary of conflict. In this way, wisdom was shared not from books but from mouths and memories, dreams as warnings and comforts. For common people, a dream could warn of a flood, a poor harvest, or an illness to come. Yet dreams also offered comfort, visions of ancestors watching over them, or of God smiling with approval. In a world where life was fragile and uncertain, these nightly stories offered a thread of meaning, a reassurance that the unseen was still listening. The power of story, unlike the polished tablets of palaces, these tales changed with each telling. What mattered was not permanence, but presence, the bond of shared story. The way a dream could ripple through a household or a village, giving people courage or caution as they faced the rising sun. The echo of forgotten voices, though the dreams of farmers and potters left no lasting tablets, they were no less real. For in the collective memory of the people, every dream was a thread woven into the fabric of life. A reminder that the gods did not speak only to kings, but to all who closed their eyes beneath the Mesopotamian sky. Dreams do not belong to one land alone. Just as the rivers of Mesopotamia flowed outward, carrying goods and ideas, so too did the traditions of dreaming travel beyond its borders. What began in the shadow of ziggurats found echoes in temples, along the Nile, in oracles of Greece, and in the scriptures of the Hebrews, the Egyptian dream books, in ancient Egypt. Dream interpretation became its own discipline, carefully organized into dream books that listed symbols and their meanings. Many of these patterns mirrored Mesopotamian thought, water as cleansing or dangerous animals as omens, journeys as markers of fate. Egyptian priests, like their Mesopotamian counterparts, saw sleep as a channel through which the divine reached human ears. The Greek dreamers. Among the Greeks, dreams became entwined with philosophy and medicine. Temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, welcomed supplicants who slept within their walls, seeking visions that could cure body and soul. The Greek belief in incubation, the practice of sleeping in sacred spaces to invite divine dreams, carried unmistakable traces of Mesopotamian ritual, reshaped to fit their own gods and worldviews. The Hebrew scriptures. The Hebrew people, too, inherited this reverence for dreams. In their sacred texts, dreams guide patriarchs and prophets. Jacob sees a ladder stretching to heaven. Joseph interprets the visions of Pharaoh. Daniel deciphers the troubling images of kings. Each of these stories reflects the same ancient conviction found in Mesopotamia, that the night was not silence but a language spoken by the eternal threads of continuity. Though each culture wove dreams into its own tapestry, the threads reveal a shared heritage. From the banks of the Tigris to the courts of Pharaoh, from Greek sanctuaries to Hebrew prophets, the belief endured. Sleep was not an ending but a doorway, and dreams were the steps that led beyond. Though separated by language and tradition, the echoes of Mesopotamian dream culture resound through the Hebrew Bible. The figures of Joseph and Daniel, especially, embody the role of the dream interpreter, wise men who stood at the threshold between human rulers and the mysteries of the divine Joseph in Egypt. When Pharaoh dreamed of fat cows devoured by thin ones, and of healthy ears of grain consumed by withered stalks, none of his priests or magicians could read the signs. But Joseph, a prisoner and foreigner, was called upon. With clarity, he declared the meaning: 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. His interpretation saved Egypt, elevating him from obscurity to power. The story bears striking resemblance to Mesopotamian traditions, rulers turning to outsiders with special gifts, the framing of agricultural cycles in dream imagery, and the use of dreams as tools for governance. Daniel in Babylon. Centuries later, another dream interpreter arose, this time in the very heart of Mesopotamia itself. Daniel, captive in Babylon, was summoned to explain the troubling visions of King Nebuchadnezzar, a colossal statue made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. Where others faltered, Daniel spoke with confidence, presenting the dream as prophecy. Kingdoms would rise and fall, but one eternal kingdom would endure. Here again, we find familiar patterns: kings trembling at their dreams, priests and diviners failing, and one chosen interpreter revealing the hidden truth. Dreams as divine authority. For both Joseph and Daniel, the act of interpretation was not merely clever analysis. It was framed as a gift from God, a channel through which the divine made itself known. Just as the Mesopotamians believed that dreams were a language of the gods, so too did the Hebrews understand them as messages not to be ignored, a shared ancient conviction. These biblical parallels remind us that the roots of dream interpretation stretch deep into the soil of Mesopotamia. Across cultures, the belief endured. In the stillness of sleep, rulers and commoners alike could receive visions that shaped the destiny of nations. When we speak of Mesopotamian dreams today, we do so not only because priests once whispered them in torchlit chambers, but because clay itself remembered. Unlike fragile papyrus or leather scrolls, clay tablets endured, and some of them still lie before us thousands of years later, unearthing forgotten voices. In the mid-19th century, European archaeologists descended upon the ruins of Nineveh, Babylon, and Ur. What they sought were lost cities. What they found were buried libraries. Beneath layers of earth and broken stone, the remnants of shelves emerged, tablets upon tablets, stacked like the bones of knowledge. In Nineveh, the library of King Ashurbanipal was uncovered, holding over 30,000 clay tablets. Among them were myths, omens, rituals, and dreams. Some bore entries from the great series known as the Ikerzak, the Dream Tablet series, where scribes carefully recorded what different dream symbols meant: lions, rivers, storms, and stars. For the first time in millennia, the dream language of ancient priests returned to human eyes: the fragility of clay, the strength of fire. Ironically, the fires that destroyed these cities preserved the tablets. When palaces burned, clay documents baked hard, turning accidental disaster into archaeological salvation. While reed mats, papyrus scrolls, and wooden tablets rotted away in the earth, the Mesopotamian habit of writing on clay ensured survival. Each small rectangle, impressed with wedge-shaped cuneiform, became a time capsule of the night world of 3,000 years ago. Museums of the night today, these dream tablets rest far from the land where they were written. in the British Museum in London, the Louvre in Paris, the Vorderasia's Museum in Berlin, and the Oriental Institute in Chicago, visitors can gaze at tablets that once sat in temple archives. Their surfaces are small, their writing dense, but their content vast. Dreams of kings, fears of farmers, the anxious questions of people who once stood on the threshold of sleep. Some tablets are fragmentary, crumbling at the edges, their text half-ear. Others are astonishingly complete, still bearing the steady strokes of a scribe's stylus. To read them is to peer into a world where the gods spoke in riddles, and men and women strained to understand. The whisper across millennia. Archaeologists and philologists, piecing together broken fragments, have restored not only texts, but a sense of continuity, the same concerns that filled Mesopotamian nights: health, children, crops, war, omens of love and death, echo in our own dreams today. Every tablet is more than clay. It is a voice. A sleeper once woke in the night, troubled or elated, told their dream to a priest, and a scribe pressed it into soft clay. Centuries later, we read it again, the whisper of the dreamer carried across time. A gentle closing as you imagine these tablets stacked in museum cases under soft light. Think of them not as relics, but as echoes of breathing lives. Each wedge of cuneiform was a heartbeat, a question, a night's vision. What survived was not merely text, but humanity's enduring belief that dreams mattered. The world of Mesopotamia is long gone, its ziggurats reduced to dust, its palaces silent beneath shifting sands. Yet one thread has never broken, the quiet mystery of dreams, the ancient night, the modern night when a shepherd laid down his head by the Euphrates 3,000 years ago. He closed his eyes beneath the same stars we see tonight. His heart was heavy with questions about rain, about harvest, about the gods. In his sleep, visions rose: a lion by the riverbank, a storm gathering over the fields. He awoke believing that the dream had meaning, and when you lay down tonight, in a city apartment or a countryside home, you too will drift into visions. Perhaps not of lions, perhaps not of storms, but of strange shapes, loved faces, or fears you cannot name. Like that shepherd, you will wonder, what does this mean? A question without an ending. Every civilization has searched for answers. Mesopotamian priests, Egyptian magicians, Greek philosophers, biblical prophets, Chinese scholars, medieval monks, modern psychologists, all of them turned their attention to the fragile world of sleep. And though their explanations differ, the question itself has never faded. Why do we dream, and what are dreams trying to tell us? The thread of human continuity. This is the timelessness of dreams. They belong to no single culture, no single age. The Mesopotamian dream books, the Egyptian papyri, the words of Joseph and Daniel, the musings of Aristotle, the theories of Freud and Jung, all are attempts at the same thing: to read the language of the night. When we dream, we join a lineage of dreamers stretching back to the first humans who ever gazed at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. Sleep dreams as bridge streams are not only personal but universal. They bridge the ordinary and the extraordinary, the mortal and the divine, the past and the present. To speak of dreams is to stand at the same threshold as an ancient scribe, pressing wet clay with a reed stylus, carefully recording what a sleeper whispered at dawn. A gentle closing, and so, though the temples are ruins, though the clay tablets rest in glass cases far from their homeland, the dreams themselves continue. Each night, humanity writes new tablets, in the silence of the mind fragile, fleeting but eternal in their mystery. In this way, we are not so different from those who once lived between the rivers. For as long as humans sleep, the timeless wonder of dreams will remain.
I can read that story to you. The oil lamps have burned low, their flames trembling like tired eyes. The streets of the ancient city are hushed, only the faint rustle of reeds by the river keeping time with the night breeze. Above, the sky is jeweled with stars, the same stars that guided the kings, the farmers, the priests, and the dreamers of Mesopotamia. Imagine yourself there. You lie upon a woven mat, the day's dust behind you, a clay amulet resting nearby for protection. The air is warm, touched by the scent of incense, and somewhere, faintly, the chords of a lyre linger, as if the temple still breathes its song into the night. You close your eyes. Perhaps you have offered a prayer. Perhaps you have left an offering for guidance. You wait, as countless others once did, for the soft arrival of a dream. For in this place, in this moment, dreams are not illusions, but bridges, carrying whispers from the divine to the human, from the hidden to the known. So let yourself drift, as they drifted, rest as they rested, and as sleep comes, may you find yourself walking the same ancient pathways of the mind, beneath the eternal stars of Mesopotamia.